All right. Well, welcome to Legend Inc. San Francisco. I'm here today with a good friend of mine and customer in Tom, and we're going to talk about what brought Tom to Legend Inc. and what got our project underway. And as we're doing the interview today, I'll show you several pictures of his back piece. We're still in progress. We're almost done. Got one or two sessions left, but the journey's come a long way. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the meat of everything. So, Tom, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Tom Childers. I live near San Francisco, and Pete and I have been working together for about 3 years on my back, and I'm really happy with the way the project's done. We're just about complete.
Right on. Well, let's go into how did you find me when you wanted to get a tattoo?
I've been thinking about getting a tattoo for probably 30 years. I'm 66 now, and I originally thought about it the way most people do, like what kind of symbol would I want on my body? And my head just kind of went around and around the universe with all different ideas, and none of it really landed. And I have, for example, Tibetan Buddhist practices, and there's all sorts of symbology there that was really attractive, but none of it really stuck. And then a mutual friend of ours, who Pete's been working on for years, I got to meet her just a few years ago, and I saw the full back work that she has, which is absolutely gorgeous.
We'll make sure we show Carmen's who he's talking about. I've tattooed her since I started tattooing. She was one of my first people I tattooed for free. I tattooed 5 people for free, and then everybody else after that I billed. She was one of my first free ones, and then later on in life we came back together, and now we're working on what could be called a bodysuit on Carmen. So
yeah, it's impressive. So when I saw her work, then that kind of lined me up to what I wanted to do, and I got really clear that I wanted to have artwork on my body. It wasn't about symbols at all. So then the question was, what would I want to have and why? And one of the things about me that's probably really significant is I've been doing meditation and working on myself for a lot of years. And my body has been a huge ally. I process a lot of my history through my body. My emotions come through my body. I'm really keyed into my body, and I really deeply appreciate it. So the artwork became something that was like a celebration. And in fact, it was a conversation inside with my body about what would you want to have on you, and how do you feel about having a tattoo? And it was all green lights. The whole project felt like the right thing from the start. So I proposed to Pete. I felt into it, and I asked him to create an image that had masculine and feminine energies supporting each other, creating a portal. And that's all I asked him for. And a couple weeks later, you came out with that piece of artwork, and I took a look at it, and it just kind of blew me away. And I was like, oh my God, I'm totally in for having that on my body.
All right, well, let's get into design and how do we come up. So we're talking about a back piece here, so we're not talking a small tattoo. These generally are greater than 40 hours, generally in 40, 60 hour. Nobody can sit, obviously, and do that in a week. So it does take time where we're tattooing a little bit at a time, usually in 3 hour or 6 hour, 7 hour spurts. And I think that is something people don't really understand. I guess I'd ask you, like, what was getting your first tattoo as a back piece? What did you expect, and how was it different than what you expected?
I talked to Carmen about it, and I knew it was going to take 40 hours or more. And I didn't have any idea what that was going to feel like or what it was going to be like. I do remember once you started working on the middle of my back, and I went, holy shit, I can't believe I've signed up for this. Because it was pretty uncomfortable. My first tattoo session, we didn't use anesthetics, and it just had to do with availability. And so it was kind of an initiatory experience. And I was really clear that I wanted to see the whole project through. And we've got more than 60 hours into it, because there are parts of my back that have taken multiple applications to get the color really deep and solid.
Everybody is a little different. You know, I wish everybody was a Caucasian 23-year-old woman who'd used hand lotion her whole life as the perfect client, but we're not all that person. Some of us are older, some of us have been in sun our whole entire life. Some skin, like on the back, can be thicker and rougher versus in the underarm area. Forearms a lot more pliable. At 60s, you definitely, you know, your skin's older. It's lived a little bit, so it can take a little bit. I also think it goes into the intricacy of a design versus, you know, if somebody said put a giant skull on my back, I'd probably do that in 30 hours. If someone said put a diamond-crusted skull on my back, well, now you're into 45. If they want that in flames on the planet Pluto with a unicorn coming through, well, now now you're adding time. And I think that's just the bottom line. So we came up with a design. I did a Photoshop file that was based on a pretty elaborate interview. I'm almost positive that we went through a design session with you and really get into iconology, like what is it about images that speak to you. So we had the male and female energy from an illustration of a woman and a man, but we also bring in the concept of a portal. And then that concept broke into bringing in ancient ruins as a semblance of energy. So how would you talk about that? How was doing the design process?
Yeah, that was really interesting. So part of it is I knew that fine line work on my body was probably not going to take really well, and also as I get older and my skin changes, that kind of tattoo isn't necessarily going to hold up as well as something that's like full colored areas. So I knew that the level of detail and precision was going to be kind of limited. And even at that, it's a pretty complicated tattoo, right? The thing that surprised me about Pete's artwork was that he pulled in these runes, Celtic runes. And I hadn't mentioned anything about that, but my family background is Anglo-Saxon and Celtic, and probably goes back to the Druids. And that language is something that I've worked with at different times in my life, just as a mechanism of using the symbols to look at what's in motion, because I orient towards the world through my energy work. And so finding those in the image was a surprise, and it was like Pete kind of reached through time and space and pulled something essential out that I wasn't even thinking about when he made that image.
I used to call it shamanistic. My tattoo studio in the late 90s was Urban Shaman, you know, right at the turn of the century. And I kind of had a gift for, I think it's just listening, but also visualizing, because people speak with their bodies more than they speak with their, you know, I think design is a language and not everybody knows all the vocabulary. If you're not in the art field, this is not your language. You know how to say, I like that picture, I like the color, but when you start talking perspective and you know, what does a color mean? Because each color has different emotions with it. You can, you know, we have this advanced language, and I believe it's listening that I became good at, and then really learning to ask a lot of questions. When I do a design session, it's more about give me the images you like and tell me why you like them, and then trying to notice patterns, why someone likes black and gray versus color versus complementary colors, and just paying attention to the body language. Like a lot of people come in and they want a tattoo and they'll say, I don't know where I want it, but they'll keep doing this. And they'll keep talking and they'll keep looking at their arm. And I'm like, I know exactly where you want your tattoo. Right. Not because of what you said, because what you did. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is just, you know, learning to listen, learning to watch with your eyes, and then you come up with new concepts.
You know, it's interesting how I chose my back, because I wanted a piece of art, and it was like, well, here's the biggest piece of my body that it could be put on. And of course, the disadvantage is I don't get to look at it directly. And that's an interesting relationship to my artwork, that it's there more for my body than for me to admire on some level.
I always find it interesting when people tattoo their back, because you can't see the tattoo, right? Even in the mirror, you can't really see it. So unless you're going around taking nude pictures of yourself from behind, that's not your thing.
No, not particularly.
Not particularly. Keep the sex life out of this. But, you know, a lot of people levitate towards Backpiece. I think that's the reason, just being it's the biggest area. I do remember when we started, and it is interesting when you start with somebody getting their first tattoo and they want a Backpiece. The first 2 minutes of tattooing.
Like, am I out of my mind for doing this?
Yeah, is this guy really going to sit for all of this?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're committing to this full image. I've never, you know, only one time somebody's tapped out or whatever, couldn't finish a tattoo in 30 years, so not really a problem, but it's definitely an interesting time when you start to tattoo. You can find out if someone's really going to handle this or not. And, you know, Tom passed the test. We're here.
Yeah, 3 years later.
Backpiece is getting finished. All right. Well, let's jump back into the beginning then. And so one of the things I've been talking about is my process is improvisational. Like, we had a image that I came up with of the two people coming out of a portal in the floor, and the finished tattoo has got a portal in the floor. It's also got a portal behind them, so kind of horizontally behind them, and then nothing else had to do with that female-male energy per se. There was flowers added to both sides. There was a hummingbird added. We ended up doing several orchids on the top, and then even flower of life as like a background. And these were all items that were not in the original drawing. So describe how that was. You're just allowing yourself to free fall.
Yeah, it was definitely a free fall. The original image had flowers or some kind of vegetation in it, and it was dark and not really, really clear. And I remember we had a conversation about different kinds of flowers, and I did a little research, and I remember reading that orchids were considered a very masculine image or symbol in Roman times. And of course, orchids are beautiful, and having beauty on my back was part of the point of the whole thing. So that's sort of how we landed there. And another thing was my skin tone is kind of ruddy. You know, I tend to be pinkish, and so having cooler colors on my back really works. It just turned out that blues and purples look better on my skin, and my skin seems to take those colors better. And I remember we were months into it. Oh, and by the way, this took a long time initially because Pete was still living in Florida. So I was only seeing Pete like 4 or 5 times a year. And so our first 2 years of work together, you know, it was, you know, we weren't working as fast as we could have worked if I was, you know, living nearby.
I get around. I live in Hawaii, Oregon, Florida, San Francisco. So me and my wife just like to travel with our family, but it's one of the good things that people do worry about that. Are you going to be available? But I told Tom I'd come every 4 times a year. We'd be back in there, and sure enough, like clockwork, he was getting tattooed 4 times a year every time I came, and we both kind of hit that commitment, and we're able to make progress steadily.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I flew out to Florida once. I came up to Portland when he was doing work up there one time. And the tattoo itself, I remember you kind of redid the image after we were maybe 6 or 8 months into it and added a bird, like a raven in the corner. And I looked at that and went, oh, you know, like there's always the question about what do you frame the tattoo with, or what elements do you add that create some structure, right? And I thought, wow, a bird feels really good, but a raven's not the right one. and I felt into it for myself. I watch birds a lot, including crows and ravens, but hummingbirds have always really fascinated me. And symbolically, it's an image of communication. So I also like the color. So when I do artwork, and I'm not an artist, but sometimes I do watercolors, and I like using bright colors. And so I like the idea of having, something that was really brightly colored on my shoulder. And then, it was a little over a year and a half ago, my longtime companion, a cat named Hubble, Edwin P. Hubble, named after the astronomer, he passed away, and he'd been with me for 19 years. And I asked Pete to put him on my back somewhere. And so I brought pictures, shared a bunch of pictures, and we looked at, doing a sort of a portrait of his face versus a different kind of a side shot. And as it turned out, Pete pointed out that a shot from the side, he could integrate the image into my shoulder in a way that was really consistent with the artwork. And I was sold. And then you said you wanted to do him as a space cat.
Yeah, I didn't even put two and two together that his name was Hubble.
Yeah. That was funny.
Outer space cat. But I think that does speak to just listening and hearing. I do find it interesting how many times I bring a concept to somebody and it just resonates. And I don't feel like people are changing their opinion to fit my artwork. I legitimately think the artwork has discovered something about somebody's personality. And the cat discovered the Hubble. We didn't have outer space in his tattoo. No. Not really. Atmosphere, but not outer space. So that was kind of a change in direction. Probably my favorite part of the tattoo is the cat. It just blended. It bordered his top shoulder in a way that just worked, and we didn't plan on it. It just kind of came out one day, and I love it when unplanned chaos turns into something beautiful.
Well, there's a couple parts. So one is that the cat really looks cosmic. And, he's passed on, so having him there with some element of sort of his durational or his, cosmic aspect was really cool. But the other thing that was a surprise, I don't know if you planned it, was that when I look at that whole tattoo and I see him in the upper left shoulder, there's a way that the whole tattoo sort of has a flow of energy that comes and emerges as this image of him. So there's the relationship feels really deep to me.
Yeah. Graphic design tells us to work in the way that, it's different for different cultures. Asian cultures read backwards compared to Western culture. And the graphic element is that we generally view images in a Z. The problem is at the bottom, you have to bring the energy back up to the top. So we always want imagery that pushes back towards the top, so you get in an infinite loop of how you kind of read the image. And this is how powerful images seduce you, and you don't even know it's happening, but great artists know what they're doing. We know that people read top left to right, down to the bottom, over to the right side, and then we need to shift the focus back up to the top of the Z again. And so wasn't by accident.
That's interesting. I was never really aware of the return back to the top as part of as a visual element. I know about the sort of the reading, scanning pattern that we have, but that's neat. Yeah, the tattoo definitely kind of moves your eyes around.
Yeah. I think if your tattoo artist isn't surprising you with some of these graphic concepts, these theories, then you're probably somebody younger in their career. Not to say they won't be educated, but the difference of somebody with a profound education in artwork knows these rules. People ask me, how do you get something to be so bright? And they generally will give the wrong answer. And the answer has more to do with color theory and complementary colors and fiduciary colors, where we're using not just bright colors, but it's their frequency and quantity next to another color that really creates brightness. It's not, I could paint your whole back red and you'd say, oh, it's bright red. But if I stuck a green dot on that red, you'd be like, holy cow, that's bright red. and it's
Right.
green is complementary to red. So used in the right quantities and proportions, you gain brightness, and your tattoo definitely is playing with complementary colors. Several pairs of complementary colors. Oh, what ended up being your favorite part of the tattoo?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the biggest surprise was actually the portal in the middle, because there was a point, I think it was our third session, that Pete had finished enough of the center that the portal was really there. And when I look at it, I see alien energy. And I remember walking out of the studio after a full day, and I'm, just feeling kind of physically exhausted, and there's a lot of endorphins. And I realized that energetically the portal was there, that it had a presence, it was open, there was an energy in my back that hadn't been there before. And so I immediately did a piece of energy work to seal and contain that space. But that was a real surprise. I didn't expect the tattoo to have an energetic life the way that it does.
Yeah. I was scared the day that I did it. So some of the work that I do, I'm not a copy machine. What you see on an inspiration piece of art versus what ends up tattooed on you is generally similar, but you're going to notice some changes in it. In the portal, I just for some reason noticed they're very alien-like characters. They're like a wise, governing body or whatever. Like in any sci-fi movie, they're the council, if you will. And I noticed that I wanted to put them in the portal, and then up at the top near the white orchids, they exist again. They're kind of at the top of the energy, then in the middle of the energy. And they became like a hidden theme in this. And the reason I say scared is I don't know if a client's going to dig that I make a shift and I add a new element. There's just the hope that I am resonating with the client very well. And I remember saying it, like, these creatures are there, these people are there, I'm gonna do it. So it's like I clear it with the client, but you don't know until you're done and the client sees it. And then it worked out really well, and it generally does.
Oh, it totally worked. In my Tibetan Buddhist studies, there's some very surprising moments that come up in the training. And I remember in a lecture, a Dharma talk, the Lama at our Sangha, our community, talking about the enlightened beings that we worked with. And she pointed out that they're aliens. And the entire room was kind of shocked at the whole idea, because we're used to working with them sort of in humanoid form. The teaching tankas show them as people. But she said, no, they're aliens. Perhaps we are as well, or perhaps in prior lives we've been aliens. And so I'm actually pretty comfortable with the fact that there's alien energy there.
Yeah. And interesting. I know we've done the moss at the back. We're getting to the end, and it is like, what are those secret elements? What are the hidden? I think they're still presenting themselves, even though we're getting to the bottom of it. And Tom is definitely, what is the right word? I mean, you talk about journey work, you talk about, I don't know the right terminology.
I'm pretty metaphysical.
Metaphysical,
I think that's a safe word.
That's what I was going to say. And I am, in that I'm an artist and I'm spiritual, but I definitely am not as metaphysical as Tom. And then the question now is, how do you work with somebody who has a different personality? If somebody came to me wanting a metaphysical journey and then felt like I wasn't into it, by into it, I just mean that I have my own personality, my own way of doing things. I don't get that metaphysical, even though I talk shamanistic in how I come up with images. And I always think it's interesting to play, because I never want to be dishonest, and I don't want to tell someone. I definitely don't make believe. I don't start acting like I'm metaphysical and into journey work and just because my client, that's what they're into. Like, if somebody comes in and they're into hockey, I'm like, well, I don't really watch hockey, but I like the fights, and I try to find the areas we can relate, but I definitely don't become a hockey fan.
Right.
just to make the client happy.
Yeah, what I would say about it is that there are layers of awareness that we have. And so Pete's operating in a visual world that I'm not a part of, but I appreciate. And I operate in an energetic world that sometimes we talk about. And I'll give you an example of this. When I started my energy training, which was 8 years ago, I realized that the house that I built, which is built right into a hillside, we excavated a lot and put a lot of concrete into the hillside to stabilize it. And when I did that, I had no relationship to the land, where I didn't have an energetic relationship or an animistic or shamanistic relationship with the land. And I realized that I had done that. My wife and I had done this project without being in that relationship. So one day I went and stood up on top of the house, and I'm looking at the hillside, and I just apologized. I apologized for doing the work that we'd done without being in relationship. And a message came back to me clear as a bell. The spirits of the land said, as you see us, so we see you. And to me, that captures the essence of this relationship. So, I talk to trees sometimes. I certainly have a relationship with the animals that live around my house, and even with my house itself, and with the tattoo. And a lot of that just comes from my intentions and my awareness and how I approach it. We don't all have to do it the same way.
Yeah, no, we can't be unauthentic for sure. So one of my favorite things about the journey with Tom has been the commitment. It's always nice, people start these big projects and they have the best intentions, but sometimes 60, 70% in, they start to get tired. It's a lot of healing. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of, you can't go swimming, or you can't go out in the sunshine during parts of your life. And I'd have to say that, to answer the question ahead of you, is my favorite thing about the process with Tom has been your commitment to putting the demons of pain behind you, staying as long as you can in a session before we stop for the day. And then ultimately you met every trip that I came back to California when I was in Florida. Now I live in both states, but when I was predominantly there, you hit every trip. And then when I came back, we've been back for about 9 months now, and you've almost hit every month, which is...
Yeah, we've done a handful of sessions.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to say. My favorite thing about the process and you individually was your commitment to it, especially when we started and you were like, oh my God. And I was like, I'm going to lose them.
What in the world am I doing?
Yeah, but you stuck through it. You were there every single time. So from the financial pain to the actual pain to the healing to the meeting and committing, I don't even recall a fluctuation in your passion or your energy. So that was my favorite thing about you.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, now I get the same question. What was your favorite thing about working with me?
Well, we definitely have different opinions about things, but I enjoy our conversations, and I really appreciate your artistic and your visual sense. There are so many people that do this kind of work. I didn't just want to hire somebody who could put ink in my skin. I wanted to hire somebody who had really solid artistic sense. And I was looking at his artwork. There's a bunch of it here in the studio. There's a bunch of it, on your body and on other people's bodies, and it's good art. And that has always felt really good to me. That the work that you're doing on my body has sort of a sacred quality, and that you have a really good design sense, and I really trust that. And so there is something trustworthy about our relationship that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Touch on it. We talked about this before we got into the video interview, whether we would talk about our differences on cameras, and I don't think we're going to go there. Just let's just say politically, I have one way of voting, he has another way of voting, and yet every time we tattooed, we balanced that, and I it's on purpose. Right? If I feel like somebody is not enjoying the conversation, then I kind of let it go. Even if I feel like I'm winning or something happens in history and it's like I'm in a better position than the other person. I try to balance it. I don't just run with it and like, I get to talk this time because this happened in history and whatnot. So,
well, different points of view are really important. And quite honestly, our country feels really, really split right now, and we're not going to heal that split by digging into our differences. We're going to heal that split by having these conversations. So I appreciate the fact that we can do that.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversations too. There was, sometimes bittersweet, but as I prepped for, you coming in, I knew we would talk. Much like I talked with Carmen. Carmen is a PhD in psychology. I don't want to get her title wrong, but
no, that's correct.
I thoroughly enjoy intellectual conversation, and tattooing has provided me 30 plus years of some of the best conversations that I've ever had that, they don't get filmed because we're doing the process.
No, and we've got lots of time to talk, right?
Yeah, hours.
We're spending a half a day or a day together.
Yeah, 20 times.
Yeah.
So it definitely is good. So, yeah, I guess you would say that at Legend Inc. you should be prepared to conversate. I'm not the type to sit there quiet the whole time, and I'm going to challenge you, and mostly because I'm challenging you through tattoo energy and what I'm doing and wanting to know new information, because the design isn't just what happened on day one. The design is what's happened over 3 years, and what's there today is similar to what was there in the beginning, but they're not. As I said at the beginning, we bring in the flower of life, we bring in the cat, we bring in a hummingbird, we bring in these white, purple orchids at the top that weren't there in the beginning. And then we even changed some things along the ways. I mean, I even changed my own design along the process.
I like how it's evolved.
Yeah.
Our last session, I pointed out to Pete that in his concept art, there was a lot more green in the portal in the bottom of the tattoo. And I said, is there a way we can bring more green in there? And he got the idea of putting moss on the ground in the bottom of the tattoo. And that's what we did last time, and it came out great.
Yeah. Evolution, improvisation, just allow yourself to be free, especially in my world. I know other tattoo artists like to be very planned. I like to plan to some extent, but I really like the day to tell me what we're going to do, and your tattoo definitely did that. So I think that's it for today. Thank you, Tom, for the conversation and
pleasure
for the project. And we'll make sure that we share a lot of photos and videos as we're doing this interview, so the audience will get a good view of what the tattoo was.
Thank you for bringing me in.
All right, enjoy.